100 years ago when I was in graduate school. Um, I had just graduated, I think, or it was the last year in graduate school. I was teaching at once a week at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. It was a very intense teaching experience because of course, the joke of being a captive audience, that the students are a captive audience, is there, but the intensity is probably it's the most intensity I've ever felt. So this particular class, I had the most notorious convict in the history of this prison, who was, I believe the interstate there is I-5, and he was known as the I-5 killer rapist who had murdered, I think, at least 5 people at the time. He was kind of a big, quiet guy, but had a kind of Manson-like following. And he was in my class, and I wasn't having too much trouble with him until a certain point, and I recognized that what he was trying to do was kind of take over the class. I am kind of possessive and competitive, and I felt like this was something that shouldn't happen, but I didn't want to go to the director of the program and have him thrown out of class. That seemed to me to be a problem, or perhaps cowardly. And I thought of him as being somewhat cowardly. And I thought ultimately what I would do is read a poem to the class. And the poem I read to the class was The Sheep Child by James Dickey. And at that time, I had nearly memorized it. So when I read it to the class, I looked at him directly when I read it. I never took my eyes off of him as he was taking his eyes away from me consistently. And I will say that he never showed up to class again after I read this poem. So I owe a great debt to James Dickey. The Sheep Child. Farm boys, wild to couple with anything, with soft wooded trees, with mounds of earth, mounds of pine straw, will keep themselves off animals by legends of their own. In the hay-tunneled dark and dung of barns, they will say, I have heard tell that in a museum in Atlanta, way back in a corner somewhere, there's this thing that's only half sheep, like a woolly baby pickled in alcohol because those things can't live. His eyes are open, but you can't stand to look. I heard from someone who, but this is now almost all gone. The boys have taken their own true wives in the city. The sheep are safe in the West Hill pasture, but we who were born there still are not sure. Are we? Because we remembered in the terrible dust of museums. Merely with his eyes, the sheep child may be saying, I am here in my Father's house. I, who am half of your world, came deeply to my mother in the long grass of the west pasture, where she stood like moonlight, listening for foxes. It was something like love from another world that seized her from behind, and she gave, not lifting her head out of dew, without ever looking, her best self to that great need. Turned loose, she dipped her face farther into the chill of the earth, and in a sound of sobbing, of something stumbling away, began, as she must do, to carry me. I woke, dying, in the summer sun of the hillside, With my eyes far more than human, I saw for a blazing moment the great grassy world from both sides, man and beast in the round of their need. And the hill wind stirred in my wool, my hoof and my hand clasped each other. I ate my one meal of milk and died staring. From dark grass I came straight to my father's house, whose dust whirls up in the halls for no reason when no one comes, piling deep in a hellish mild corner. And through my immortal waters I meet the sun's grains eye to eye, and they fail at my closet of glass. Dead, I am most surely living in the minds of farm boys. I am he who drives them like wolves from the hound bitch and calf, and from the chaste ewe in the wind. They go into woods, into bean fields. They go deep into their known right hands. Dreaming of me, they groan, they wait, they suffer themselves, they marry, they raise their kind.